Now we're ready to look at our second board called Recruiters. The Recruiters board will be used for tracking communication between recruiters. Now, not everyone, and I realize this, not everyone uses a recruiter for their job search, but recruiters can be a very powerful tool to help you land your next opportunity. And so it's important, because you may be working with a number of recruiters, to be able to manage the relationships that you have with those various recruiters. And so let's talk about that as part of this section. So we're going to talk about 3 different examples for how you can manage recruiters as part of the scenario section and the walkthrough that we do. In the first example, we'll take a look at how you met a recruiter that you want to work with. The second will be you have recruiters that you want to work with. Ones that you maybe haven't met, someone introduced you to them. And in cases where you have someone who told you about a recruiter you should talk to. So in the second case, you know someone that you want to work with, and you haven't met them before, but you do know them and you want to work with them. And the third is someone who mentioned a recruiter to you and you want to work with them. So we'll discuss those 3 scenarios. But let's talk about the list in the recruiters board. So list will be used in this case to track the activity related to recruiters. Now this is very similar to what we did in the opportunities board. So we're going to have 5 different lists, approximately 5, and you can add or remove lists, and everything that we're talking about, you can customize it however you want. These are just lists that I'm putting in as part of those jumpstart templates. But we'll have lists for recruiters to contact, sent email or left a voicemail, meeting or call scheduled, you plan to use or do not plan to use. So these are the lists that will be created. And then what we'll do in those lists is that we'll track cards in those lists. Cards will be used to track the information on individual recruiters. And within each card, we're going to track a couple different items. The title of the card will be used for the name of the recruiter, followed by the recruiting firm. The description of the card will be the contact info for that particular recruiter. The comments section, where the activity is stored, will be used to track any notes, maybe some copies of emails, and linking to other cards. Maybe you want to link to something, another recruiter, or link to another type of contact for that particular person. And then finally, the due date field, and that will be used for follow-ups. So for the recruiters board, for labels will be used to track the conviction level for different recruiters. Just like with opportunities, you may not be as interested in some opportunities as others. The same with recruiters. You might be more excited to work with some recruiters than others. So even if on your list of recruiters that you want to work with, maybe you've got 10 people there, maybe you're really only interested in working with 3. So for that, I've created a label called preferred, and you can mark a card, these 3 cards out of the 10, with the preferred label, and that'll just give you a visual representation of those particular cards of those recruiters that are your preferred. So we've talked about how to use Trello to track opportunities. Next, we're going to talk about recruiters. And so recruiters are going to be represented through cards like we talked about just a little bit earlier. And so let's give some scenarios of how you can do that. So to create the recruiter board, I'm going to go into my links, and I'm going to go into recruiters, and I'm going to provide this link to you. So when you click on template recruiters, this is a template that I've created that you have access to. And once you have this template, all you need to do is go into more, click on copy board, and then you can type in recruiters. You don't have to worry about keeping the cards, but definitely keep it private, and click on create. And once you've done that, if you click on Trello at the top, you can see that you now have recruiters listed as one of your boards. So let's click on recruiters, and we can see that we don't have too many lists here, but the idea is that we want to track the recruiters that we're talking to as part of our job search process, so we can keep notes on who we're using. So we'll just go through 3 scenarios here, 3 quick scenarios, again with all these different boards. There are lots of different ways they can be utilized and all kinds of scenarios that can come up. But let's say you met a recruiter and you want to work with that particular person. And so in a particular case like that, let's say you met a recruiter and you want to talk with them, you can go ahead and add a card, and we'll just call this person Lisa Johnson. And then we can include some information with some of the activity. Talked with Lisa at a recent networking event. And then I'm just going to click on send, and then we'll close that out. And so now that I can see here I have a call or a meeting that's coming up with Lisa. And maybe one of the things that I would also add to this is meeting with Lisa scheduled for next Friday. And I can just add that onto the card. And so once that meeting's complete and I've had the opportunity to meet with that particular recruiter, I can decide if I want to use them or if I don't plan on using them. And so let's say Lisa's someone I plan on using. I'm just going to put some quick notes in here. I'm going to say Lisa was great, plan on using her, and send. And send is like just a way of saying okay. And then I'm going to move her into the plan to use list here. And so that's one quick way. You've got a recruiter you met, you want to work with them, and you put their name in and you make some notes. The second thing that you might want to look at is to take and this is just a particular name. One of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier is that when you're creating the title, you want to use the name of the recruiter and then maybe follow it up with the recruiting firm. So let's say someone tells you about a particular recruiter, and so let's say this person's name is Sandy Williams, and they're with a recruiting firm called Infinity. Just picking a random name out here. So here's the card, here's the name of the representative, the recruiter, and the company that they work for. And then we can go in here and we can make some comments and say something like, name was passed along to me from my friend Eric. And that way I have a list of recruiters to contact. So when you're let's say you're going through the process of looking for an opportunity and you want to work with recruiters, it's very, very possible that you have friends that start giving you lists of names of people to talk to and recruiters to work with. So I think it's really helpful to add in a bunch of people here. So I'm just going to put the names. I'm not going to worry about the companies. And I'm just going to put first names just to get some names in here. So here's Bob. Here's Jan. Here's Dan. Here's Chris and Lauren. So we can put a whole bunch of names in there, and then as we get around to calling them, we can do that whenever we have time. And so one of the things that I think makes sense is, let's say you want to reach out to Bob, Jan, and Dan. Maybe you send them an email, and so you might want to include some information like sent an email with a copy of my resume. And so we'll just save that, and then we can put that into sent email or left voicemail. So if you did this with a couple people, let's say you sent an email to Jan and Dan and Bob, and you've got maybe some times pass by, you haven't heard from them, you have a choice. You can either leave people in this bucket, or if you don't hear from them, then you can just move them into do not plan to use. And so let's say Bob never responds back. I could say, never heard from Bob, and we're just not going to use them just because there's no relationship there. So that's another scenario. But I do think it's helpful to add the names of all the recruiters that you plan to contact here. And you'll want to generate that list as soon as you can if you're looking for an opportunity. And then the next step would be to send them an email or call them, leave them a voicemail if you don't talk to them. And then you've got a bit of a follow-up bucket here. So you have people that you can follow up with, and if you want, you can use the date feature. So let's say I want to hear back from them by the 22nd, and this way, this is just a bit of a reminder, and as we get closer to the 22nd, it'll turn yellow and then red to remind you that you need to reach out to that person. If you have meetings or calls, let's say I heard back from Jan. I sent an email to Jan and she wants to touch base with me on a phone call. I can say, heard from Jan. We're going to meet next week. And then we can move that to the meeting or call scheduled. And then let's say I talk with her and it's a great call and say, had a really nice talk, plan to use for sure. And I can move that right in the plan to use column. So we talked about how to create a card with the proper title, and that title could be the name of the recruiter as well as the recruiting firm that they work with. We also talked about using comments and using that to track notes. You could even put copies of emails in there. And we also talked about how you can use due dates. One thing that I also want to mention here is that if you have contact information, you could also put that in the description. So you could put the email address here, a phone number, things like that. Those could all go right inside the description, so you have that easily available to you at the top. And so that's recruiters, and that's how you can use cards to track recruiters. Really simple. Very convenient way to do it. The one thing that we didn't talk about that I want to make sure I can cover is labels. So let's say you have a particular recruiter that you really feel good about, and let's say you've got a list of maybe 10 different recruiters you plan to use in this bucket. You might have some that you prefer more than others, and that's why I created this label within this particular board for preferred. And so if you click on preferred, it's just going to tag them with a blue label. And that's a bit of a standout way of letting you know someone who's a preferred recruiter for you to work with. And if you want, let's say you have a couple of other recruiters in here. I'm just going to put some more names in, Don and Sam. And let's say Lisa and Don are both the preferreds, and so let's say I add Don as my preferred. You can move cards within a list. So there are also some tools that can help sort things like that. But it's possible to move all of your preferreds up higher to the top of your list so you can easily see them. Anyway, that's a really quick take at recruiters. Easy to use, great way of tracking all of your recruiters.